So it is one of those, but I can see us going in here, and we are into game number 1. It is Skellige versus Syndicate. So Kams decides to queue the Syndicate here. He's going Syndicate on red coin, and we can see the hand draws right now.
And TailBot did exactly what we thought he would. He chose his best list for blue, which is Skellige. Now this list is great on blue because it has a lot of bronze engines that are quite strong. Now the only downside here is that TailBot cannot afford to lose on even, and Kams has a great list to push on round 1. So this is going to be interesting. I think they're going to play deep into this round.
Quite possibly, round control can be really important in these matchups, and you just see Kams there just choosing to mulligan away the second halfling safecracker. He's got how many crimes in hand? There are 5 crimes in hand because that poison does fit, so they are some pretty sizable safecrackers. Kams on red coin doesn't necessarily have to commit his justice either, is in a pretty nice spot there, and we just see, I believe, TailBot dropping the boat out, opening play. That's pretty Skellige standard.
Yeah, very standard proactive play. It's a very nice boat to have. You only have 2, so it's nice that those 2 didn't brick by accident because of raiding fleet. Now, Kams preferably wants to decide whether he can take this round or not. He is definitely not going to give ice round control willingly, and the play here is normally going with your halfling safecracker. There we see it. So this is a very nice intimidate engine, and it boosts by 5, meaning he has 5 crime cards in hand.
It does indeed, and that will be, it's probably one of the most telegraphs openings. It's exactly what you expect to see when you are coming up against line pockets. We've all faced it 1,000 times on ladder since it jumped into the meta, and it is probably the most common that you're going to see. Now, this is an interesting line here. We can see TailBot decides he's going to play his Vabiorn for raiding fleet, gets his second ship out. Sounds great, it does thin the deck, but it also denies him access necessarily to Blood Eagle. There's no guarantee of drawing it. When you look in his hand, of course, there is already an Iced, a Harald, and the Skjordal Drummond, so his main targets he does have access to, but still potentially risky if he does feel he needs it later.
Yes, I actually just took a look at TailBot's hand, and this is not good for TailBot because Kams has the ability to go very deep into this round without committing much, yet TailBot has 2 of his win cons in hand. He has Iced, which he definitely does not want to commit to early, and he also has Harald, which he want to play in round 3. His Skjordal is in its first form and will only play for 6 points. You do not want to see that, so TailBot is limited here, and we'll see how far he can go before he has to pass, or else he will be trading down significantly.
Yeah, in addition, he's very keen not to lose this round on even, and he will be trying to get out of this round at some point, because losing on even is the worst case scenario for him here. You can see Kams putting the pressure on, dropping that Nova Gradient Justice to really add pressure. Each crime card now is going to be +2, although there is a bleed ticking on the other side here, so it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. Kams will definitely want to push to win on even here. And at the moment, TailBot is working out which engine does he develop right now, and it is the Greatsword. Drops it down. That will add an additional point to all the damage that happens. Also pings the stratagem as well. He'll be quite happy with that.
Greatsword's definitely something you want to get out early, right? Otherwise, it doesn't help much, and it's also, yeah, it can go quite tall. It's something that Ice can normally use if you don't get Juta when you need it. I'm wondering what I'm wondering what TailBot is willing to commit here, because you'd rather want Harald in round 3 than Ice in a short round 3, because Ice might not find Bloodthirst 2 if you are pressured into a short round, making him much weaker. So if TailBot is truly very afraid of losing on even, we might see a point where he's trying to get Bloodthirst 2 now, and perhaps even commits Iced. I don't know if he's willing to do that though. He might just opt for a long round 3, but I don't think Kams will allow him one, to be frank.
Quite possibly not. It's going to be interesting to see there. We just get a swindle dropped for Kams. He's sat on red coin, so can just develop the coins for his carryover. Still plays for 2 on board, drops him up to 8 coins. Doesn't feel the need to spend once either to get the boat out immediately. Is pretty comfortable knowing that he can perhaps get those coins later or do that in a following turn. But does offer TailBot a little bit of a chance at a pass here. He can play a card, that's a little bit slower tempo than perhaps he originally planned. Could decide to drop something like the Drummond Berserker here, hope that it doesn't hit the shield. This card can play for 8 for 5 on its own, but the 2 pings would also for the Greatsword. So it could be a 10 for 5 card here and might be a nice card if he is choosing to go for the pass, and instead just goes for it right now. Says, I'm not going to risk it, I'm out.
I totally agree with this play. TailBot is in a very tough position, and you never want to commit those legendary cards in round 1. Instead, he is now a card up and has that little bit of advantage if Kams decides to push him in round 2. But if he does, we can see TailBot properly setting up his ice and perhaps going into a short round 3 with Harold. But I'm merely speculating here. Let's see how this plays out.
And Kams chooses to take first a Nero here. Has decided to take first a Nero, simply pay a crime and pass. That's interesting from him. He's deciding there that first the Nero is the least valuable card in hand. Perhaps that indicates he isn't intending to push as deep into the next round, as ideally he'd like the first one for the push. It'll be interesting to see what he does, but he does get the boat out and gains maximum carryover. Of course, it will be a 10-card second round, so he can certainly play a few cards to redevelop that carryover if he chooses.
Yes, that certainly does indicate that he isn't willing to go deep into a round 2. Playing on Neuromancy there certainly wasn't necessary. He did have some nice cards he could have spent there. Obviously not the poison that will find value later. And a TailBot drawing Morkvark, that's very nice to see, seeing that he can't tutor it later. It might actually find some very nice value in this matchup, as I don't believe Kams is even running Little Sir Skewertooth, so he doesn't have to worry about anything being untouchable. We see the ship coming out there and Kams filling up his pockets to the brim. TailBot now having to decide how he wants to set up those engines of him.
Definitely. And he is just, as you say, Kams taking max amount of coins there, potentially just for the pass for the carryover. He is missing a lot of cards here. He only has access to one of his poisons and less Triss high rolls, but there is no Philippa, no Jacques, no Tunnel Drill or Heatwave in his hand. So it'll be interesting to see here, TailBot just dropping a single Brockvar Hunter. He does run a War of Clans if he chooses to get that back later as well.
War of Clans is a pretty nice card. It's one of my favorites now. I've seen some people including 2 in their lists later on, and I definitely see the value in that. Kams baiting out, well, not baiting out as we're not actually running Grimace in this list, but he's pretending that he might just go ahead and poison your Brockvar Hunter. What are you going to do about it, TailBot? Are you willing to commit some cards here? Or are you going to set up your engines even further?
And for TailBot here, the pass probably quite telegraphed, you'd have expected, and for him, it's not terrible. The cards he's chosen to play here, he's dropped an On-Crate Raider and a Brockvar Hunter, but in reality in this list, he's just populating his graveyard for better options for either War of Clans or Harold, and Kams is saying, I fancy my chances in the long round against you, Skellige. I believe I will draw what I need. I'm not scared. I know I have last say here, so I can try my best to deny the Bloodthirst options. He has chosen to keep both Shakedowns in hand, opting to be able to boost his cards up again with the idea of negating that bleed. And he's now going to be searching to find some of those high-end gold cards.
I'm quite excited. We're going into a long round 3 with Skellige versus Syndicate. There are some scary cards in hand here. TailBot trying to find Jenga. He gets Hjalmar instead, which is not, well, it's not bad. It can get rid of a lot of cards that Kams has on board. And unfortunately we do not have the lock, but that's alright as well. Morkvark ironically can take a care of Cleaver in one go, Cleaver being a 1-point card, so Morkvark against Cleaver might just be the way to go if Gord is going to be played last. But let's see how TailBot starts this one off.
Yeah, quite possibly could just drop the Herkia here. Interesting that something that you're used to coming up against on ladder when you have placed line pockets is Payday. But there are no paydays in this list, so 5-point removal is a little bit more difficult. The risk, of course, of dropping Herkia, the amount of coins sat in that lined pocket, and it may end up that Philippa simply steals that engine away from you, which could be really, really scary. He may opt instead to go a little slower and just opt the Invader, or even just all in and go Harold, and it looks like he has decided, no, you know what, TailBot, pedal to the metal here. A big purple dump truck driving straight through. He is dropping the Harold immediately.
Yeah, he is baiting out those crime cards. He's protecting pure little Herkia for now. Don't underestimate her ability to get you Bloodthirst 2 in a long round. She pings every single turn, a guaranteed ping, unlike Harold who needs a warrior for him to play. But this is indeed a very strong hand TailBot has. Kams now has to decide whether he's going to set up his Intimidate engines from the get-go, because he knows they are not going to survive very long.
And that's the thing. Access to that pocket that you need from Crown Splitters is really, really important here for him. And he chooses to Anero straight away, and he is just going to Heat Wave, and I'd imagine it's going to be that. He removes the 8 instead of the Herald over the course of the round, does not want that damage to be available there. It's an interesting choice from Kams, has decided that the Herald random pings are less valuable, possibly due to the number of shields that he's going to be able to create with Cleaver's muscles.
That certainly was an interesting play there. Perhaps he decided that he'd rather just remove the 6-point card with Heatwave and instead get rid of Harold with one of his other removal cards. I don't know. It certainly was an interesting play. They're seeing that Harold can ping constantly, whereas that Raider could only have done 2 points of damage. But oh well, here we see Jar coming out, not committing too much, seeing that it doesn't have to be removed. A good play right there.
It doesn't have to go straight away, although a single Herald ping onto that Jacques, if it does happen, could mean Skjordal can remove it if no spending occurs. So drops that spender down. Now, he did draw into the Hjalmar, and if you look into the graveyard, banish a unit, well, there is a lovely Greatsword sat in the graveyard, a card that, as a result, gives you a decent amount of toll reach as well, without having to worry. He has managed to avoid drawing into his Yuta, although, as we've noticed, there are a couple of crime cards sat in the graveyard that could make the Ice Straw awkward.
And he decides to go for Hjalmar, getting rid of his spender right off the bat. That already decreases Kam's spenders. He now has a Cleaver. He's already setting up on the board. He has Philippa as well as the drill that will go brr. Here we see him playing that shakedown. And how many will he spawn? He goes for 2, saying, I know Cleaver might not survive that long. Interestingly enough, he doesn't give the shakedown to Cleaver either, because he might just assume that TailBot is going to play Morgvarg on Cleaver, getting rid of it immediately.
Yeah, I really like that line. He's also decided to boost the Flaming Rose Footman to make sure that it isn't necessarily as easy to give that Bloodthirst either. Every card right now is protected one way or another from that Bloodthirst. But leaving it low does open up the Skjordal play, so now has been able to save Morkvarg and potentially be able to target another spender, maybe hoping that he's looking to spend on a Sea Jackal. Of course, we know that isn't going to be the case here.
No, certainly not. Kam's actually playing very well here. He doesn't want to put his coins into his own cards. He'd rather transfer that into damage on TailBot's side of the board, because he knows the potential of TailBot targeting some of his larger units with cards like Ice as well as Morgvarg. So that's a very good play from Kams right there.
Very true, and we see a single spend for 1 coin, which probably means we're going to see some bloody good fun here. A card that can be awkward sometimes, but if you find the right moment to play it, can be fantastic. Alternatively, he looks like he isn't, because he is deciding, which means he's deciding Triss.
Alright, going with Triss. And what do we pick?
Oh, I was right all along.
Bloody good fun.
He just decided to go around the houses. He decided, you know what? No, I'm going about it this way. Absolutely fine. And really nice from Kams, knowing he's going to play the Triss, has decided, in the event I find the bloody good fun, I am now in a safe spot to remove one of these 5. So really nice there from Kams, reading his potential draws quite well.
Yeah, and at the moment he doesn't have any cards in the red, meaning Ice is not yet viable, at least not at its full value. So TailBot might want to consider playing something like Herkia now. Interestingly enough, Kams went with Triss, meaning he is telling TailBot, look, I still have another bloody good fun in my deck, and you don't know whether I have it in hand or not. If you play Herkia now, I might just get rid of her. But there we see Herkia coming out. And TailBot immediately uses her, knowing she's not going to survive.
I really like that line from TailBot there, because as you say, there's a good chance it's available to be hit, or worse, Philippa. It is a fantastic Philippa in this matchup to be able to steal a constant damage engine. So he does that, also gets really lucky on those pings. High rolls, both cards that could create Bloodthirst.
Yes, luckily he doesn't have Harold anymore, because we have seen this happen in the past where Harold accidentally pings that one unit in the reds, taking away your Bloodthirst entirely. So that's not going to happen anymore.
No, that I'm convinced that's coded in by choice. It happens to be 99% of the time. And we now switch back, and TailBot is trying to work out now, how do I develop this Bloodthirst? Having access to those shakedowns is absolutely huge for Kams, because he can just consistently deny this Bloodthirst over and over again here. Even being able to pull the boat out, set himself up a nice amount of coins with a Crown Splitter pocket on board. Kams right now in a nice spot if he chooses to take that line, and I think he probably does.
Yeah, I think you are right here. Kams has to decide when he's going to play his drill though, because you want your pocket to be full when you do, as you cannot assume that it will ever survive. So we see Shakedown coming out, denying Bloodthirst 2 once again. TailBot and Kams playing that game of, can you deny my Bloodthirst? Can you not? Let's see. Kams doing very well so far with his card choices. Might actually have prepped against this sort of matchup because it's going quite well for him right now.
Yeah, very much so. And it's a constant game of, do you have the Philippa? And TailBot's choice of how and when to develop cards and engines, you always have to do that with that card in mind, because if you choose to drop a certain card, you can lose so much value. The Drummond Berserker now would be a fantastic steal for the Philippa, but it would also deny some coin value on the other side. So it comes down to, when do you choose to do it? TailBot instead, I am going to find this Bloodthirst. He is determined to find this Bloodthirst here.
He is indeed determined to find that Bloodthirst, and he knows that Kams will never commit Gourd before his last card. So having last say, Kams can play Gourd without it being touched. That's actually very nice for him, seeing that Tobias has some very tall removal still in hand, with Iced being a factor here. Now Kams has a pocket full of coins. He now has the option of using that drill if he wishes. The Flying Redanian is already out, and we'll see whether he decides to commit Philippa here or the drill. It is entirely up to him.
I think I like the drill here, and I think Kams is currently trying to work out. He does have to be careful. The rope timer is going, and of course if he's playing drill, he is intending to go brrr as much as possible. There's a decent amount of board there. He can't play the Bloody Good Fun, and instead does take the Philippa for... and he takes the 5. Okay, so he decides to take the Philippa instead. Does still have access to full leader, so still has a huge amount of potential points. Has chosen a lower value Philippa in order to keep those coins as well.
Yes, he doesn't want to steal anything too big, as it just transfers to ice value. And it's worth noting that he stole Morkvarg with a nice little armor there, so it's going to be more difficult to get it to a Bloodthirst value. Now is a good time for TailBot to commit his Berserker on the other hand. You want to set that up now, though. I doubt it's going to survive very long, as we do have access to that drill still in hand.
Yeah, most definitely. The Berserker coming down is kind of risky because of the drill, but ultimately it's always going to be. Iced likely to be second to last turn, may even be considering it now, but obviously knowing that he has a unit in hand that he can drop on the board, he may decide that going last with it isn't sensible, and instead takes the On-Crate Raider.
He does take the Raider. It's also worth noting that Kams could have Sea Jackal in hand. TailBot doesn't know, so he might want to just hold on to Ice a tiny bit longer, and we see that drill coming out and going brrr. We're going to see all those coins coming out right there. Our 7 provision little drill doing its job quite nicely between 2 Cleaver's muscles, getting full value, 3 points for 2 coins. What a trade.
Very much so. Coins generally used to trade at 1 for 1. Now it's more like 1 1/4, even 2 on average. And you can see him using all of the coins there, deciding, I am going to just use these coins. Does he decide to use the last shot on the drill? He does. Could have chose to hold those for the Bloody Good Fun to potentially remove something a little taller. But now the Bloodthirst is on board, ultimately. Removing the Iced isn't going to find value. And oh my, he does find Jutta in hand though.
Oh, that is gorgeous, actually, because we won't be finding 12 points of damage value anyway. So we now
Very true.
Yes, we now get Jutta out on the board. It doesn't really matter that much. And we can now pick any other large card that is still in deck and damage a card by that. We also have Bloodthirst 2, which is quite beautiful. So that card is going to come out of the graveyard and also pop onto the board. Of course, he's going to go with the 8-point Bear Witcher. What a load of points.
It really is. It's incredible how many points that can swing for. He is going to drop the Berserker as a last play here. and we see that come down just for a lonely 4. And again, as we mentioned, no way of spending a single coin here. TailBot is not going to find max value. He is he's up by just 11. And Gord at a chunky 16 comes in, and Kams takes game 1. 1-0 to Kams on red here. And he is ahead. So far, Twitter is not happy. It is incredible. That was such a good matchup.
I quite enjoy that. I thoroughly enjoyed that game, and I think what didn't help with TailBot's lineup here is the fact that he couldn't win round 1. I did speak to TailBot earlier, and what's nice about your Skellige deck is the fact that you have a very good chance of actually winning round 1, but you win round 1 with using your bronze engines, and unfortunately he had quite a bit of legendaries in his hand, which wouldn't have ended well for him, so he couldn't win round 1. He had to pass right there, and therefore he had to go into a long round 3, not of his own volition, and go up against Kams with a hand full of golds. So TailBot not taking that one, and Kams getting Syndicate out of the way. TailBot is going to have to play Skellige again now. I wonder if he takes it on blue coin again.
I think he probably does. I think he's confident he will be able to get the other lists through, and there's a chance here now. He's trying to work out. He gets red coin, so does he try and take something like Swarm on red here and try and push, or is he worried perhaps he runs into the Nature's Gift list? It's going to be interesting. Does Kams from blue here drop this Nature's Gift, as it's probably the list that he'd like? It's unlikely he's going to drop Double Cross on blue, so it is more likely to be Gift, and I think that is what's going to play into TailBot's mind here. Which of my lists do I feel have the best shot against Gift? He has the options, and Arca Swarm here, it's a strong list as we've seen. It runs Yerden, it runs Crimson Curse as a weather effect, Row Punish, and it's certainly not a terrible matchup there, albeit Yen can be a little tricky. If your opponent swarms as quickly as they can in a round, Yen could actually end up trading for very little points, so certainly worth a consideration. I can't see... maybe he takes the Skellige again, I don't know, but it's the list he's most confident with on blue, even though he did just lose there, so we will find out shortly, I suppose.
That is certainly true. I mean, he did say that he's pretty confident on any coin, but in reality, oh, okay, TailBot taking Arachaswum makes sense. A very nice list to try and win on even, and Kams does take his Nature's Gift list on blue. Hopefully he gets that Doomka in hand, as that is your main goal in round 1. TailBot, on the other hand, having some Tor removal cards there, all 3 in hand. We see 2 Geralts, and we see Heatwave. This is going to be quite an interesting matchup.
It is indeed, because normally you associate that list. It does have the ability to remove Tall, but it also has the ability to swarm, has got the eggs in hand, as well as the ability to consume them with the Indraga Warrior, has found Crimson Curse in hand as well, a really nice hand on the other side for TailBot here. And you can see Kams mulliganing away desperately the additional Purify, has got Ethne in hand here. Does have Ethne in hand here, which isn't necessarily what you want if you're going to be hand buffing, because there's a chance it can fall on the card and then lose it as she evolves.
Exactly right, exactly. The fact that Ethne does evolve means you don't necessarily want to play Doomka right now, as the boost she gives to your hand will go away the moment Ethne transforms into a different form. Instead, he places a nice Hamadryad on the board, gives it a leader charge. This is a very nice card to start off with because it's proactive, it has a lot of tempo, and it also gives your Treants 1 more point in combination with the symbiosis that your leader already provides.
It does indeed. Played the skill check there, as he was basically saying, I do not believe you have Parasite to remove this. Instead, a rapid drop of Crimson Curse to try and find as much value with that Blood Moon. It takes 5 whole turns to find the value, so if you can get it down nice and quickly, it is great. The choice will be now, when as Kams do you try and negate that bleeding with something like a Caress? That Caress could seriously stop some of the value there.
That is certainly true. He instead decides to go with a nature card, and he boosts Gezras of Leda. A very good choice indeed. You don't want to see that being removed, but TailBot unfortunately has quite a bit of removal there already. If Gezras ever reaches 9, then Geralt is just gonna take him out.
He is indeed the Chad of all Geralt. If any of them are wearing socks and sandals, it is the original Geralt of Rivia, just jumping in and destroying your tallest card for sure. So TailBot will be pretty happy with the hand he has here, and now will be choosing to try and develop that more traditional Araka Swarm plays of getting the eggs down, getting ready to consume, places it next to the drone as well, potentially to try and fill that row, although is playing on the back row here rather than the front. Traditionally, you're used to seeing them play front row, maybe playing around that round one potential Gezerus, one of the biggest cards that could wipe an entire row in this matchup if you don't get them boosted quick enough.
I mean, it's definitely a good habit to place all your cards in the range row because of a potential Gezras you might need to push a little bit. It's also sort of catch-22 here because Kams wants to boost one row entirely, whereas Toblight has Yerden that will target one row entirely. So Kams might just be baiting out Yerden here early. We will see.
It would be a huge card to try and get, although with the Blood Moon effect, I think it's very unlikely that it ends up getting committed in this round, but could if he's trying to really push for that win on even. I guess we're going to find out, and we do see very quickly a consume there, just starting to spread, push those units out, and it's worth noting as well, while normally you need to keep the back row clearer, because some of your cards need to go back row, normally that would be Yen, it would be the Whisper's Tribute, and usually Triss would be another card that would need that. Not an issue for Tobliat. He has got Geralt in place, so his back row has a little bit more room.
That is very true. He also wants to avoid that melee row just in case Kams does decide to play Gezras. That's not something you want to see with a row full of 1-point drones.
No, it definitely is not. It is not indeed. And you can see Kams here, quite content, dropping out some special cards, keeping himself ahead, isn't at the moment in too much risk and has a very nice hand, has access to Call of the Forest and Isengrim's Council should he need some quick points. He won't want to commit the Gezras if he can get away with it, but if it's necessary to avoid losing on even, I'm sure he would if he had to.
Yes, if Kams is deciding to go all in here, he's going to have to start committing really quickly because Toblight has a lot of range and a lot of tempo with this sort of deck. He can catch up very easily with a well-placed Bone Talisman or just Yennefer if he really wants to. So Kams needs to decide whether he wants to opt out of this round before he reaches 4 cards, or whether he decides to go in. And TailBot actually playing Yerden. Kams likely very happy to see that in round 1.
Quite possibly, although it certainly signals intent from TailBot saying, you know what, that's a 12-point Yerden, I'm going to take it right now. And obviously the extra 2 points from Geralt himself has reset the full value on that and maybe indicating, I want to win this round on even. So start committing better cards, friend.
Yeah, Kam is in a difficult position now. He really does have to decide whether he is committing or whether he is opting out of this round. I don't know about you, but you never want to give Araka Swarm round control. It is extremely deadly in a short or long round, and the fact that Kams is now committing his defender indicates that he might very well push here.
Yeah, very much. I mean, if you can bleed out the Araka Swarm, its short round is certainly less potent if you can force out a lot of its power. And you can see there, we see the defender come down. Now, it's a little sad in the sense of if the defender is there, but there is no Pavko Gale to protect. Now, being able to protect Pavko is usually quite huge, because while Monsters doesn't have 5-point removal, it does have 6-point removal with Parasite, so it is something that needs to be considered. It's a really nice engine to be able to develop. But Kam's currently on 5 and behind here, choosing, do I play a leader charge or not? Currently trying to work out, is that worth... Oh, my bad, he's already passed, and it is on to Tobliat. He was just looking so intently, I thought he was deciding.
He's looking very intently. Both of them are a lot of decisions going in here, and Tobliat indicating he might take the pass, likely not, but playing Maxi is setting up your next round. It's preferable to play her in round 2 most of the time, seeing that you get a better choice of cards, a little bit less cards in your deck to choose from, but he decides to play it now, and Kam's finally going with Dunka. An interesting play.
Yeah, it's a risky play because ultimately there is only a 50-50 here. Ethne is going to absorb those boosts and they are going to trade worthless unless, of course, she is dropped in this round, which is less than ideal. And now, potentially, he is on 4 cards and behind on points. TailBot could decide, okay, you know what? I win here. 2 cards up. I guarantee myself last save, but I lose round control. Cam's betting that that isn't going to be the case here with this pass. And TailBot trying to weigh up his options. Is this something I want to do?
I think TailBot is going to try and push Kams into a corner here. Well, he needs to figure out which round 3 long round is stronger. Is it his or is it Kam's? Because both are equally scary, and he decides that his list is perhaps the stronger list if Kams is a card down, and they have to go into a long round 3 here.
Indeed, and he manages to get out with a simple special card. Pretty happy with that, and 2 of the boosts from Dunker do fall on Gezras, but
Luckily.
do put it in the 9-point range, so maybe that isn't as
no.
ideal as it looks, because now original Geralt can of course come down and destroy it. He'll be a little sad that the card that he was able to get out with was a Nature's Rebuke. He would have hoped that there would have been potentially a bit of a stronger card available here, but he does know now in the long round he has first and last say as a long swarm list. But you can see some incredible draws on the other side. Kams will be very happy with those cards, and I think this may be the fastest pass in the West.
It certainly will be, but I do know that the Geralt's Witcher senses are likely tingling there. It's just waiting for that 9-point Gezras to make its appearance before it gets taken out. Hopefully it still gets 2 turns before that happens, as you normally do place Gezras in the melee row. Oh, well, no, we've actually committed our defender, so it gets taken out after 1 turn. Not good.
Indeed. And now Kams just deciding, do I have enough points here to try and play some sort of tempo push? Is this a round where actually I drop an Ethne, for example, and try and force some cards out and get some of that swarm out right now? Probably not, and takes the pass, which it seems most likely.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, and TailBot likely expected that to happen, so he now just has to mill his deck, play something he doesn't necessarily need. Might go for the Relic there, I am not sure.
Yeah, I can see the Whisper's Tribute improves his draws by dropping a card. Say he can play an Arachas Nest, for instance. May just drop a single Chimera, but it's so valuable across that long round that it seems unlikely. Of all the cards in his hand, weirdly, it could even be a leader charge onto a single Spontaneous Evolution instead, if he values that less. But just trying to work out now, what is his least powerful card? I think it's one of the 2 on the right-hand side for him for sure.
I do agree with you there. The problem in a long round 3 with Arachas Swarm is the fact that you easily do overswarm your side of the board, and seeing that he still has all 5 of his leader charges, many of them might just go to waste. So committing something like Andrega Larva isn't the end of the world there. Okay.
And decides instead, you know what, I want to keep all of those cards as potential options. I'm just going to play it on the melee row instead. I would not be too sad if any of those cards were drawn, although he'll be very happy to see the Arachas Behemoth come into hand instead. Interesting line.
That Arachas Behemoth is going to play for a lot of points here. I'm excited to see that coming out. And what does TailBot still have in his deck that he has missed here?
He's missing Doldilock and Dora Grey of Vol. And some movement, but not really huge for him there. Kams mulliganing away Kiaran because in this matchup it isn't huge. Has missed the Hamadryad though, and will be quite sad about missing the second Hamadryad. Not available, but that final mulligan does bring a Forest Protector, which is not terrible by any means, and quite flexible based on what is in the graveyard. Has already played a Rebuke, a Circle of Life, and a Dryad's Caress, so has the full range of options.
I mean, both players luckily have tutors, so they can still pick some cards if they really want them. We have TailBot with the Neuromancy, and Kams does have Call of the Forest, so if they miss something crucial, they still have access to it. And TailBot starts off the round by filling his board, Kams setting up his Symbiosis engines.
Very, very quickly. That makes perfect sense. Now, the argument is, do you deal with Ethne here with your Parasite? Because if you do, you're then going to have to Heatwave something like the Pavco Gale, potentially, which can be quite scary. TailBot doesn't know that the Gezras is at 9p, so will want to save the Heatwave for that, and as a result, may leave Pavco ticking in that situation, which could be quite scary. So right now he's trying to work out, do I just do my thing and leave that potential engine on board?
I mean, I'm having horrible thoughts here, and I'm sure TailBot wouldn't do anything like it, but playing Yennefer, perhaps trying to get rid of those 2 Dryads would always be an option that someone like TailBot might just do, but instead he goes and fills his board, setting up that Yennefer as quickly as possible.
That makes sense, and we see a Forest Protector coming down next from TailBot. No, my mistake, he has played Falls and is going to boost instead. So what is he going to choose to boost here? Probably the Pavko. Does take the boost on the Pavko, manages to remove a unit, which in this matchup is quite huge.
Yes, putting that Pavko on 7 obviously means that Parasite is not enough to target it anymore. So TailBot now has to commit something like Heatwave if he is to get rid of Pavko. Question is whether he ever decides to keep Pavko on the board, assuming that Gezras might not be 9, and instead keep his Heatwave for Gezras and hopes that one of the other cards get into the 9-point range, saving his Geralt for that instead. It's going to be interesting. Here we see the Pavko coming down. Does TailBot deal with it in a list that is supposed to swarm? That's a very scary card.
It is indeed. Now, he may decide, okay, Pavko is hitting for 2 a turn and is going to do some damage. Could decide to just Yen here and take all of those units out of removal straight away. Because the longer he leaves this Yen, the worse it gets for him. Because ultimately, he already only has 6 more units. That's still a lot of points, but it gets worse and worse as this progresses. And with every moment that he does this, it makes it harder. The Yen also opens up an interesting line. Yen will boost Pavko Gale up to 9 and right into Geralt of Rivia range.
That is certainly true. Getting that Yen out might be exactly what he does now. That's exactly what he does, because we're also going to be seeing some token Treants being spawned on Cam's side, and every turn we wait is another turn that Kams has more boosts. So that puts TailBot on a nice 59, but immediately Berza starts doing his thing, damaging that card by 2 points.
And here we see now him taking the choice of what is he going to pull out of the deck. Not surprisingly, it is a Hammer Dryad. And it's in a really nice spot, knowing Yerden's gone. Hasn't got to play around the Yerden now. Doesn't want the back row to fill too much, though. As anybody who's played Symbiosis before knows, if you play those cards, they inevitably fill your row and kill your Gezras' chances. So I have done that numerous times. I can see why that list has gone front row now. Makes sense.
It certainly does make sense. TailBot here running out of space. He decides to go with Geralt. He does have a nice 9-point target right there. Gets rid of the very powerful Pavko engine. That's not a problem anymore for him. I think that was a good call on his end.
Definitely, and we see the Shaping Nature come down now and goes for the maximum potential point value, which is of course the 5 boost and the 5 vitality. Doesn't greed it up on the Hammer Dryad though, because he is acutely aware Toblietta has access to Karathi Heatwave, hasn't seen a single Aneromancy either, so we'll be pretty confident that there is access to it.
Yes, TailBot now going with Chimera. He has Adrenaline 4, meaning it will work. That's a lot of points for his bronze card, and it frees 1 space on the board as well. Cam's playing Gezras in the range row, knowing he's going to get more points out of the melee row on TailBot's side.
Definitely, and we see a rapid heat wave there coming to deny that Gezras damage, usually more valuable than the boost for sure, so I can understand why he starts back row in the hope that he finds multiple turns, although the reality is it's always very unlikely.
It certainly is. I'm wondering whether that Parasite is going to come down soon, or whether we're going to see another unit coming out of the deck with Oneromancy, because TailBot is certainly running out of space. He still has 1 drone he can use, but he's not yet sure whether he wants to commit that and overswarm. Let's see.
And that's the risk. I mean, one of the things he has got left is Spontaneous Evolution in his deck. Now, Spontaneous Evolution usually is played onto drones here, but it has the option of playing it onto the Chimera, which is a beast instead, and it just plays for a flat 9. Could also, of course, take the Chimera for even more points. It is a huge tempo swing for that card.
Now, I like the Chimera play here because it automatically opens up another space. So TailBot gets every single drone out of his leader ability. The correct play is likely now something along the lines of Bone Talisman, and he has Parasites in hand because why not? You never know what Kams is going to be playing, right?
Very true. I can see him parasiting first. He wants max value here as far as possible. He wants to try and get his board full, and a single point could really be the difference here. He's only behind by 5. But with the Vitality on board, he's actually behind by 8, and instead uses his leader charge and goes for the full option here.
96 points. Board putting Kams on 95. That Hammer Dryad being boosted by 2. putting him on 98, and TailBot takes it on 102 points. What a close game, a 4-point difference.
That was close indeed. A long round and TailBot comes out. It is now 1-1. Wow, that was an interesting series, and I'm curious whether, looking back, it was a really nice pass from TailBot early on, opening up the possibility of having first and last say, making the decision. I'm pretty sure this is where I get out here. Could have decided to push further and take the option of winning on even, has decided, you know what, I'm pretty confident that actually this is better for me. So has gone for that, took the pass, and ultimately it paid off in the end.
It's certainly that early Yerden was a very interesting play, but having this many tool removal options, you kind of have to know when to play what. I did like the way he tempoed through that round 1. He committed his Crimson Curse quite early because it does need 5 turns to really reach maximum value. Kams, on the other hand, having a long round was quite nice for him. He did waste a point or two with that Dunka, but alas, he did transfer some of the points to Gezras too. We now have to Blythe again on blue coin, as well as Kams on red. I'm wondering whether TailBot takes his Skellige list again, or whether it just is too predictable.
I think he does. I think he will be concerned that if he doesn't get it through now, he doesn't necessarily want to try again. I don't think he wants to take it on red coin. He's more likely to want to get his imprisonment list through on red instead against Kams' matchups, because he will know he potentially has to worry about gift again. He could, thinking about it, gift now still an option. Could try and snipe and get Nilfgaard through. Actually, that is a valid point, but we won't have to wait very long to find out, because I think they are going in. And they are indeed going in right now. So we are going to find out. It is Skellige versus Nilfgaard. It is Skellige Nilfgaard. He does decide to take the Skellige line again.
All right, well, Kams here has 2 locks in hand already, which is quite scary for a list that relies on its bronze agents to win round 1. And I have a feeling Kams isn't discarding any of those locks right away. He's going to try and perhaps win on even here. But he hasn't drawn his Joachim nor his Roderick.
No, he hasn't. He does have the option to thin with the hunting pack, has access to Vigo, and lots of poison as well. Both bronze poisons and the cupbearer in hand. Also does have Menno, so has got access to the coup if he decides to play it off of a spy. Could, of course, get one from Vigo, which is quite possible. On the other side, access to an on-crate longship, and also Vabiorn for raiding fleet, as well as Blood Eagle in hand here. It is a bit more of a playable hand than the last blue coin matchup for TailBot, but does have his 2 king cards in hand. You do see the Herald and the Iced as well, so does still suffer from the veteran tax, as Skellige does tend to.
Yeah, TailBot just too good here. Gwent favors him with RPG, but unfortunately he doesn't yet want Harold, nor does he want Hjalmar, as he doesn't necessarily have any warriors in his graveyard. So we will again reach a point where TailBot might have to take the early pass, as he's not necessarily willing to commit any of those cards off the bat.
Not if he can help it, but his stratagem here does do a little work for him. The Veil, of course, against Nilfgaard is huge, so that boat very, very likely to survive. In fact, almost guaranteed to survive in this matchup, and will keep doing work as long as this round keeps going. It's a little different here as well. He can set his damage engines up with a little less fear than in the previous matchup, because he hasn't got to worry about Philippa constantly, although the Joust for Kams in hand will feel great onto this raider. He will be really happy to find value from that and deny 6 points with just a Joust, potentially.
Yes, I also see that as a potential card. A very nice trade indeed here. A 4 for 5, I believe. And there we go. We get rid of that raider off the bat. Very nice indeed. I want to see Dunka being played here in the early round, as I don't believe Kams can do much to stop her, but we are not that interested in Bloodthirst right now, so I see no reason to commit her if we potentially go into a long round 3 and need her in order to obtain Bloodthirst a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I can see the Herky being really, really valuable in this matchup. A veiled unit that's unpoisonable and can constantly give you access to damage and Bloodthirst is massive here, so I'd be surprised if we do see the Herkia. I think TailBot is going to be looking at this and saying, I'm confident in my long round, hope your access to locks is scary, even up to 3 with Vigo, but I need to not lose on even here. So he will be looking to try and find a way to do that. Repeats his previous play and says, okay, I now know you do not run 2 of those cards. This one will survive.
Yeah, I'm trying to put myself here in TailBot's head, and his plays make me think that he is simply thinning out some of his bad cards and maybe not committing in this round, because a card like Dunka you want to set up quite early, as it's a very nice engine, and the later you play it, the less points it's going to give you. Right now, he's just playing his bronzes and perhaps has already mentally opted out of this round because of his lack of viable bronze engines. He has just a little bit too many gold cards in hand that won't find a lot of value here. And he might just assume that Kams does have access to Joachim, meaning he can easily tempo ahead here and win on even if that's the case.
Quite possibly. We see him choose first Blood Eagle, so he has access to that for the following rounds, and uses his charges, uses the Blood Eagle to pull out a Brockvar Hunter, and Kams decides to take the pass here instead, which does surprise me a little actually. Kams deciding, you know what, I don't want any part of this round, I've done a little bit of thinning here, I'm out as well. There was a big number of points difference. It was about 11 points needed, which is a decent chunk. And looking at his hand, there wasn't much to poison. Had a slightly awkward hand here.
Ooh, TailBot there having a little hound in his deck. That's exciting stuff. Second to the left. I think TailBot is extremely happy here. This is exactly what you want if you are iced. A long round is exactly what you need. And I wonder if he's going to allow Kams to go into round 2. TailBot might just thin a bit more of his cards from his deck before going into a short round 3 perhaps. It totally depends on him. I know he has been talking about targeting Nilfgaard and Syndicate specifically with his lists, so he knows exactly what he wants to do here, and he is in a great position to do so with round control.
He is indeed, and you saw from Kams there, and some of you might be wondering, why did he mulligan Masquerade Ball from his hand? You want Masquerade Ball. Well, not if you just lost round 1. If you lost round 1, you know you are going to be bled as Nilfgaard. It's a really nice mulligan choice from Kams, assuming, of course, he finds it again later. So he's going to rely on doing that. Hasn't found the option yet for Roderick either, so will feel reasonably content. He would much rather have a hand that can defend the bleed, which with Brathens and Joachim, he certainly has the option of. And TailBot instead decides just to pass as well.
Yes, he definitely just threw away that Baywitch card because obviously he didn't find any value, and Kams would have thought the same. Now, TailBot going into a long round 3 here. I'm sure he's very confident with this matchup as he didn't decide to bleed at all. It's pretty difficult to bleed this sort of Nilfgaard list anyway, and I'm not surprised that TailBot decided to do it that way. Now, Kams will not be playing quadruple Joachim, he will merely be playing double Joachim if things goes his way.
And he's chosen there. I'm really surprised by the pass, but Kams does find Masquerade Ball, but also chose to use Menno on the pass, not guaranteeing himself the ability to find his coup. So now, although has drawn Nolziger Sergeant, no, that's showing as a Nolziger Sergeant for me, but has found Roderick, has got Joachim, so his ball will definitely proc all the way through here and should have access to pretty much everything he wants. Those locks in the long round, very scary, and even passes the Yennefer skill check as well, so we'll be very happy with those mulligans. But on the other side, you can now see that obviously we have Harold, Herkia, iced, and finds the Skjordal Drummond with that mulligan. Hasn't got access to Morkvarg though, which will be interesting, but as it is no longer pullable at all unless it's drawn with iced.
Yes, and once again not drawing Jenga either. This is that sort of catch-22 we were talking about earlier. These cards cannot be tutored by Blood Eagle for they are not warriors. Unfortunately, he doesn't have access to them, and he cannot stop Kams' engines, which can get pretty big, believe it or not. Now, he's going to have to use his Blood Eagle, likely to get out his Herald in its 3rd form. That's a very valuable card you don't want sitting in the deck.
You don't indeed. And now, in the 3rd round, that Joachim there had one of 2 targets, the Nolziger Sergeant, and there is only one other target left in deck, and it is the Usurper Emperor. So, in the event that the decision is to find coup, you'd have to find coup from Roderick here, you then hit Joachim. Right now, it has a guarantee of taking the Usurper Emperor. Slight problem with that line though, now whatever you steal with Yennefer is not the target that you pull. So we'll have been hoping there for Kams, he would have liked the other card there, I'm pretty sure. We'll be sad that he loses that 50-50.
Yeah, that's definitely the case here. And TailBot likely playing Doomka now, which is extremely nice in a long round 3. Oh yes, the 2 7 provision cards that are my favorites in this game. Yes, of course. No, Herkia is my favorite 7 provision card in this entire game, and it finds a lot of value in a long round. And here it can't be touched unless it gets purified, which it does. An interesting play here from Kams, meaning he has 1 less poison to take out a card of TailBot, but instead decides, no, Herkia, the 7 provision warrior, is going to get locked here. I'm not allowing you to keep her on the board.
That's really nice there as an option, because you can close that engine down or simply likely force TailBot to play it right now, which means he cannot hold that guaranteed or at least better chance at Bloodthirst. Really nice there. Still has options with the poisons later, of course, with Masquerade Ball, but as you say, the value of a lock onto Herkia in a long round is pretty big here. So he will feel very, very happy that he's managed to get that out.
And he gets Harold, a nice card to have. Oh, is Harold the card that accidentally showed up as the Hounds?
It was indeed, yes. Harold became a Hound. He did indeed. And we see that lock come down as expected.
Alright, yes, Harold the dog. Makes sense. It's lore friendly. So Herkia gets dealt with quite nicely there. We still have the Raider. Now the problem is if the Raider targets the Cupbearer, it doesn't necessarily stay in the red, as Assimilate is going to continue boosting it. Instead we kill it instead. It makes sense. We want to get rid of those engines ASAP as they can grow quite tall.
Yeah, across the long round it is really scary. Rolls here on what I'm assuming is Artorias Vigo, and we see that he decides to take the Emissary for max points, again playing around the possible Bloodthirst here. Obviously the Armoured Cavalry has no way to be boosted, but Brathens itself is another option to boost that Armoured Cavalry. So pretty scary. All of these tall units do play into a Morkvarg, and he will expect to be Morkvarged, but we know that there isn't one in TailBot's hand.
Yes, that might unfortunately be a win condition here that TailBot has missed. We'll see in the end, but at least Ice will find some significant value on his boosted units. He thins his deck quite nicely, though it's too late to thin it. It's not going to help him. I mean, at least TailBot has a very nice hand for round 4. He's going to ace that round with all the golds he has. Okay, so
there is the yen, and the yen is there, and we see Kams now taking a slightly early leader, finding, of course, because it creates a version of the card, all of these cards not in their round 3 forms here, now trying to work out, well, I know I've got Harold, do I take the Iced? No. Skjordal probably trading for a decent amount of points because I can damage here and hopefully be able to deal with this Brockvar.
Yes, that's Skjordal unfortunately not changing along with his leader ability. It remains a 3 right there. And it is now in a Bloodthirst range. TailBot now has the option to use Iced if he wants to. He does have targets, to be fair, but you don't necessarily want Juta on the board at the moment, as it is going to get poisoned.
Very, very true. And that's something you certainly want to try and avoid for as long as possible. And hopefully for TailBot, this ball won't be single cyclable, although it is likely to be with Roderick. Now, one interesting line. Setup from Kams has stolen the Harold and will be hoping to get a second Harold from Joachim here if he can find a way to pull it, failing that Roderick. He does have a single on-crate Raider in the graveyard, if I'm not mistaken, so that Harold will play for quite significant points.
And we see that lock coming out off the bat, stopping an engine in its track. It goes for the boat and not the Brockvar Hunter. That makes sense, seeing that the boat actually does tick every single turn you play a unit. And Kams will be playing quite a few when he plays that Masquerade Ball now.
Makes sense, and we see another engine gone, the Hjalmar dropping out, finding great value there, removing what I think was the Bear Witcher, and then taking out Artorias Vigo, so far denying as many points as possible. Both of these lists wanting long rounds. It's a really interesting long round matchup, this one.
It certainly is, and we see Brathens coming out now. Are we going to go for the Longship, or are we going to go for another Emissary? We decide we're rather going to go for some assimilate value, boost that Brothans, and we do go for Brockvar Hunter. Alright.
Yeah, takes the Brockvar Hunter. I'm a little surprised that it wasn't the emissary of choice to potentially deny the Bloodthirst 2 there. Instead decides to take his own damage engine in place, but that's a line he's decided to take so he can do some damage here of his own and remove the Brockvar Hunter on the other side with his Brockvar Hunter, as it was only at 1 point. So he's trying to deny more pings, thinking, if I take the other line, you probably find Bloodthirst again anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely the case here. You don't want something like Brockvar Hunter being able to actually target specific cards, because now we're left with the Berserker that could target anything, but luckily it does target that Brockvar Hunter, and it's now safe to say that we will have Bloodthirst 2 for the rest of this round. There's nothing Kams can do here really to boost any of his other cards, and he finally commits his Masquerade Ball. It's time for those poisons to come out.
It is indeed, and of course, knowing open deck list and ultimately playing against Skellige, it is likely to be Devotion no matter what, whether you're on ladder or not. If you're running up against this list, there is no answer to that Masquerade Ball there. So as a result, it will find power. What is the next line? Ice likely is second to last, but we know that Kams can single cycle if he finds the right cards from Roderick. There are currently 5 gold cards in deck. If he manages to find either Coup or Usurper, he guarantees himself a single cycle of his Masquerade Ball, but of course does have the single Fangs of the Empire to potentially deny as well.
I mean, TailBot has also missed a few cards here, and playing Iced early would of course give him a chance to draw one of them. Something like Morgvar could be quite significant, but then again we are giving a larger target for Kam's poisons. But like I said, we're going to be fine. If we get all these cards in a metaphorical round 4, then we're totally fine here. TailBot having only golds left in his hand.
And the Roderick doesn't find either, so instead takes Gwent here, knowing that he can take the poison. Probably takes a Viper Witcher Mentor in place right now, because it will find maximum value. No? Oh. Okay, he knows the top 3 cards in his deck. What is he going to give? Trying to deny some value. Puts his own Usurper there, but only gets the Invader in exchange. Does not steal the Utah. And that, he has decided, he knows, that's it. And red has forfeited, meaning we go. It is 2-1, and TailBot is now 2-1 up in that series. Didn't find the high roll. If he manages to hit one of the choices there, I genuinely believe he is likely to win in that. TailBot now 2-1 up, going into the final game. And I believe now he is on red coin as well, if I'm not mistaken, with imprisonment, and has a couple of shots at getting that through. He will be pretty happy to be in that situation.
Yes, imprisonment, quite a scary list if you're going up against a normal double cross list. We have talked with TailBot about this one in significant detail, and there is definitely a reason he chose imprisonment as his leader. He was specifically targeting a Nilfgaard mirror match. Now the thing about a Nilfgaard mirror match is the fact that you often overswarm in a long round 3, but if you're able to take away one card on your opponent's side of the board in one turn and play another spy, then you're able to play more cards than your opponent. And with imprisonment, that is possible, as you can damage a card and play a card in the same turn, something you can't often do with other decks. It doesn't help if you Yennefer a card and your opponent simply plays one of his cards in that spot. And we see Kams coming in here with...
He's always going to queue Gift here. There's no way he's going to choose that mirror. He is going to want red coin for the advantage. So while TailBot will like being 2-1 up, queuing into Gift is very scary for Nilfgaard because of the amount of Purify that it has. Kams will be quite happy, as much as he would rather be 2-1 up himself here. It isn't always the best situation, because now Kams queuing in on blue coin with a list against one that he will be quite happy to be facing, really, in terms of matchups. And then if he does manage to win this, goes into a Nilfgaard mirror with red coin, so he gets at least a little bit more chance of dictating the round length. So it should be interesting to see, and as you were hoping, we do see a first turn boosted Dunker.
It's always beautiful to see the other 7 provision card in this game that I do love. I love my female 7 provision cards. They're quite strong little ladies. And this one is going to give us some nice carryover. We don't have Efna in hand, which is absolutely great for us because we won't be wasting any boosts here. None at all. And as you said, if Kams does win this one, which is very likely, though let's first give Blight a chance here, because Kams has a lot of Purify options, which is quite scary for something like Nilfgaard, because you take away a lot of their toll removal. But we will see how this one plays out, and perhaps we do go into a mirror match after this, but let's see this one play out.
Let's indeed. And Kams dropping cards as quickly as possible here, and drops the Pyrotechnician. It's an awkward card, because now, to play and steal it for Blight there, he has had to drop an Informant on the board, making his own chances slightly worse of finding value with it. The Pyrotechnician is another really nice possible opening play. It's the lack of availability for Purify in Kam's hand isn't necessarily too relevant in round 1, because ultimately nothing that is currently there is wanting to be poisoned anyway. So we'll feel quite happy with the current draws. And it was speed, speed, speed from Kams. TailBot just taking a little bit longer here, saying, no, I'm going to try and I'm not going to, jump into your game. Kams very, very good. Again, more speed Gwent. Drawing people into playing his way. He does it so well and has done it so consistently for so long. It is one of the talents he has.
I mean, some interesting plays here as well from TailBot. Playing those spies on the board immediately halves the engine power of Pavko here, so Kams might not be willing to commit it here to win the round. Also, again, we see Nilfgaard not drawing Joachim nor Roderick in round 1, meaning they can't do that point slam to get ahead. They have to commit some other cards. You also have Usurper here in his first form, not something you ever want to commit in round 1. But we likely see a Brothans coming out. Well, now that I think about it, Brothans might be kept for later, as we have already seen a few spies, and those would have boost Brothans with his assimilate value. But we do see coated weapons coming down and a Pyrotechnician being clicked.
Now, the coated weapons was interesting because it's only a little clog, and this isn't a clog list, thankfully, as I would be very unhappy. But a Wandering Treant just removes one of your mulligans. It's a card you simply do not want at the top of your deck there. And he is in a position to be able to do that, TailBot, because he's on red coin. He hasn't got to worry too much about tempo here, and will ultimately be quite happy if he chooses to take a pass, but does have a chunk of reach as well. His leader ability, while he wouldn't want to play it, is just a held 6 points of value, and Brathans can drop down for some quite significant point value as well. Plus, there is a 9-point card on board that is poisonable right now if Kams does decide to take that pass.
Yes, Blight here having to decide what he wants to play. The fact that he hasn't played any assimilate cards yet is very telling, and it will be interesting to see whether he goes into that or whether he's willing to pass. Though I very much doubt he wants to pass yet, but I wouldn't be shocked.
I think he may have to.
I also think this might be what he's going for, and he instead decides not to. He's going to push a little bit further into the round, go with Vigo, which is a very nice tempo option, and also does have Assimilate, although it's a little bit too late for that Assimilate value to tick too much. He gets 1 point from Emissary, ticking that Assimilate, and he does boost it as well, meaning it is safe from removal.
It is indeed, and another pretty big boost there. Drops the Echo card, effectively playing it for free, the Shaping Nature. Kams, rapid Gwent has just dropped it and gone, okay, your turn, not giving TailBot even as extra second to think. As you point out, TailBot really not ideal losing this round if he has to, because he will get pushed here, and the short round potential for this list is quite scary. Gord, very chunky in a short round. Efne as well. Even Gezrus can find some value, although it is better, of course, in a longer round. But it is quite scary if he does lose here.
Yeah, and Kam's quite happy with this round going on a little bit longer, because Dunka is just she's keeping on with those boosts, and the cards in Kam's hands are looking quite nice, though I doubt he wants to play those now, as they're going to be quite significant in a later round.
They are indeed, and that will be something that does concern TailBot here, as he decides to take Coup and play for the extra points that it can generate, as well as gaining some later. Of course, getting the Coup back. Pushes, he's got great reach, but again, Kams is literally slamming cards here. This is Kams at his absolute finest. Does choose to play Berza, and Pavko Gale rather. Sorry, Berza.
It is Berza, let's be honest.
He disagrees, and obviously, playing it now, it's the least valuable of his cards. As you pointed out, the spies, half the value of the damage because you no longer control Scoia'tael units. Pavko Gale is almost like Devotion before Devotion existed, and maybe even gets a Devotion change so that the spies don't have such a benefit to it one day. Who knows? But right now, Kams is 10 points up and pretty content here as the cards on the other side starting to become less powerful and not necessarily ones you want to play here.
Okay, and we go with Experimental Remedy and get a nice little emissary. Again, a lot of emissaries there on Cam's side of the board. It boosts another card with 8, a very nice proc there. And we're both in a very difficult spot here. Kams at least has the option to tutor something he might not want to commit, and TailBot not so much. TailBot will have to commit his Cupbearer here. That won't do much. He might try and bait out a pass from Cam's side of the board with a potential poison, but he's still going to have to catch up with some points, and Kams does decide to go on, gets a Hamadryad out, as well as a leader charge. This is looking very good for Kams, and TailBot needs to be careful here before he overcommits.
I think it's a difficult situation. The leader charge as well to really push home for Kams, saying, you can't make this in a single card now. I don't believe if I drop a leader charge here, you can make this with what I've just done. Uses the single point from Pavko Gale and drops that there. So it's not actually the 13 points. It looks like it's 15. And now TailBot has to jump out here. Will he find a hand that is suitable for the bleed, though? That is what Kams is looking for here in order to try and push out. TailBot having to hold those more powerful cards and just hope that he can resist a bleed if one is forthcoming.
Kams having an extremely big little defender right there. Whoever said dwarves were little, that's going to be a nice target for Blight, but we might just see him giving it Veil with his Echo card, who knows. And we see him mulliganing some cards there, and I rather doubt he decides to push here.
It's interesting because he's got a couple of cards he can drop, and TailBot right now trying to work out, can I mulligan this ball away? Are you going to bleed me and give away all of the carryover that you just gained? He does decide to take the risk and mulligans away ball on the basis that he is concerned, if everything gets pushed out of me here, I don't have ball for the short round, whereas every other card in my hand is playable.
Yes, TailBot here actually relying on round 3, but that play from Kams indicates we're not giving up here. We're not going to be a card down as we can't draw a pass anymore, and he plays his little Pyrotechnician there. A very nice deterrent if TailBot decides to play a valuable full provision card, as that card just dies off the bat. Of course, TailBot can go ahead and lock that card, but it won't do a lot of damage, seeing that this card does have armor.
Yeah, very true. There is the synergy in hand with Tempering, of course, if Kams does get to keep this alive, meaning it won't actually damage itself. TailBot here will probably want to stay ahead at all costs here to try and resist some of the bleed. May even decide to drop Gaved here and try and high roll everybody's favourite Viper Witcher Alchemist is a possible line here, instead of just committing something like the Brathans. Instead, from the options we see on screen, looks like he has decided, I am going to commit this Brathans here.
I think that's a good choice. Staying ahead here is very important for Blight, because at least now he has the advantage of being a card up. He definitely doesn't want to give Kams a pass. And Kams so far trading up here with that Brathans. It depends on what Kams plays now, and he does go for Pyrotechnician's boost. He can now play that whenever he feels like it, and it will not get damaged at all with full armor, though I very likely doubt he does that right now.
Yeah, he only probably clicks it if it gets poisoned, I would imagine. Would much rather not have to do that. It is incredible the difference it makes when your opponent plays so very quickly. The additional stress level that can cause, even for a top player, it really is fascinating to see. I mean, TailBot doesn't need to commit too much here. Can literally drop a Bronze Poison, for example, as an option onto that 9, and that is exactly what it does, because he is so close to anyway. Oh, wow, okay. Kam's not messing around.
Getting that full 4-point value and playing that 11-point defender, Blight is not going to be happy seeing that 11 points right there. Never something you want to see when someone is trying to bleed your cards out of you.
It really isn't, and now there's an interesting position. He's 14 points up and has protected that card from poison, has decided to drop a chunky Figgis on board. The Purify is available to him, but he then can't transition the Pyrotech poison anyway because he doesn't have access to it, which feels really, really sad for him. the amount of points he now needs, he is going to do that. He decides to take that anyway and threaten that I have the poison, trying to get Kams out of this round.
Oh no, we're purifying the defender actually. Oh yes, we're purifying the defender and threatening that we might have a poison for that pyrotechnician.
Here comes what I think is a veil. Obviously,
there we see it.
We know that TailBot does not have the other poison in hand here, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But Cam's not afraid, has said, I'm going to protect myself from this poison no matter what you do. There is a pretty sizable gap opening up now. It is 16 points of difference here, which is pretty huge. So TailBot now going to have to start committing, and Kams even more so decides, okay, I'm going to push this to be even further so that you struggle without giving me leader charges to get away here.
Yes, this is becoming a little bit scary for TailBot. He might just have to go all in here. At least his location card at Adrenaline 2 will give him a pretty hefty Viper Witcher mentor if he decides to go in that direction. Though some people prefer to go for the Alchemist, as it gives you a little bit of RNG options. But that guaranteed point slam Viper Witcher mentor might just be the card that we decide to go with here if we are TailBot.
Yeah, and as it's a guaranteed, I believe it's a 12-point play here. If he drops that down, he can't afford really, I don't think, to take the Alchemist because he ultimately needs those points. Doesn't give him too much of a read, but he knows either Gezrus or Ethne are in deck, so he knows that obviously he knows it can't be both. Could still be either, so it's not a huge read for the hand. He also opts to take the pass instead, doesn't play the leader charge to try and get ahead here. Interesting line. So are we going to see the Forest Protector come down from Kams? Does he believe he has enough of a read on the hand that he can afford to all in here?
This is a very difficult position here because Kams can assume many things, and I think we know that TailBot's last two cards are going to be his most valuable cards. So do we try and push both of those cards out of him, or do we keep our little advantage with our boosted Forest Protector, an extremely strong card, especially in a short round? Kams has to decide here what TailBot has, and he decides we're going to bleed all of those good cards out of TailBot's hand right off the bat. And are we going to see that last leader charge to go for a 2-0, or did we merely go for the bleed?
I mean, he's up by 18 right now, so no single card does it, and he's aware of that. The Usurper trading for 12 plus a couple of pings. The possibility of Pyrotech and double leader may end up doing it, but it certainly would be quite the high roll if it were the case. So an interesting line, decides to hold on to that leader. And TailBot should be fine to be able to get out of this here, but I don't believe he's going to do it in a card. He may decide to Pyrotech and click first, try the high roll and hit the Forest Protector or the other Pyrotechnician. He may decide to do that before he decides what other line he takes. He's just frantically doing the math as we speak.
Yes, and Cam's certainly not giving him any extra chance to think about it. I find us talking faster every time Kams plays. It's very, it's a very powerful tactic there on Cam's side. You just want to catch up with him, and we see that Usurper coming down off the bat, putting them in a very, very close range. He commits both leader charges to get ahead.
He does commit both leader charges and also puts a bad card up on the top as well, uses Gaved as well, decides card advantage here more important than my leader charges because ultimately the engines that I'm going to lock right now are negligible anyway in the short round. They're not going to find too much value, so now has first and last say, and it is going to come down to top decks, top deck and wreck, as I have heard it said.
Oof, it's looking really good for TailBot here if he has his Joachim combo, which is going to play for quite a bit of points. Does he have enough units left in his deck, Lionheart?
In terms of what is left in his deck, there are 2 units that he can pull, both Nalziger Sergeants, but he is missing a stack of gold. He has not got Ball, no Cantarella, no Roderick, no Yennefer. Huge, huge misses on the one side from TailBot. On the other, Dryad's Caress there, able to potentially deny a poison that unfortunately doesn't exist for TailBot. He is not going to get those poisons. But Call of the Forest and a chunky Gourd that currently sits at 11, but will sit at 13 by the time it's done.
Ooh, this is very, very scary for Kams here. Very scary indeed. We might see that Nalziger Sergeant drop first there onto TailBot's end. It will give him the most points with its deployability. Kams has the option of playing something with his Call of the Forest. He likely goes with that first, as you don't want to give a too big unit to Tobliat, as he might just get rid of something like Gord off the bat, or some nicely placed poisons, or like you said, the Yennefer that he has missed. But Kams doesn't know this, and we see Tobliat playing that Nausicaa Sergeant, a 4-point card.
We do, and a slightly slower play here from Kams. Has Call of the Forest in hand and has missed a lot himself. No Kiaran, no Volv, but also Gezrus and Ethne. I'd be surprised if Ethne isn't his opening play here, and perhaps dropping the leader charge in an attempt to protect one of those units. May well be his line here. In less typical fashion, he's taking a little bit longer here with this move, trying to work out what his best line is. I think it is likely that's the way he goes here. And we're about to find out.
We are indeed.
Takes Valve instead here, going for the idea of his Caress, perhaps finding more value overall if there is a Dryad on board, so does not take Ethne. Could, of course, also be worried about Yen. Ethne is a terrifying card to be Yen'd into Joachim. Really, really scary, so has decided to take a different line here. Does not know what we know, cannot see Tobliat's hand, but the Purify on the Joachim is lovely because it is no longer couable.
Oh no, that is a problem for Tobliat, but instead he's just going to play his Emissary and say, you know what, I never needed Joachim. I'm just going to go for that Emissary. Oh
and
dear
even
goodness.
With the last say, not being able to hit that Joachim is absolutely huge here, because the Purify, it is not enough, and Kams wins that matchup. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that takes us to 2-2, and we go in to a final game. And it is everybody's favourite. It is going to be a Nilfgaard mirror. Oh, this one's going to be interesting.
I mean, this is the one we've all been waiting for. Let's be honest, it's all been building up to this single mirror. I mean, I have questioned Tobliat about this, and he is very confident that the single leader change gives him the advantage in a mirror match. So I am very excited to see this happen. But Kams played that game extremely well. Hats off to him. It seems that bleed did actually work out in the end, even though he was a card down in round 3, which seemed to be a rather big disadvantage in this sort of matchup.
It was. I mean, both players do miss a lot of cards. Finding that Purify to deny the second Joachim is absolutely huge there, and he will be delighted that he found it. Took an interesting line to play around a potential Yen, something that I wouldn't have necessarily done. But obviously that's only because I can see the other side of the board and he doesn't have that luxury. Kams plays so well in that matchup and will be very happy now going into this. It is a mirror. While some of the lists we have seen and the leader abilities might not have a lot of variety, one thing that will definitely give you some 5 headlines is a Nilfgaard mirror right now. As you say, TailBot feels that he is favoured with that list, going in with Imprisonment. Other people I've spoke to completely disagree and think Double Cross does. So, there are no surprises. They both know what they signed up for, and it is Nilfgaard v Nilfgaard. Tobliat on blue, Kams on red, and this, the winner, books their place in the semi-finals tomorrow.
Yes, they do, and here we will see which school of thought is correct. Do we want another card in an already overswarmed board with Double Cross, or do we want that little bit of edge with Imprisonment? We will have to see. First thing I notice here is the fact that Tobliat's stratagem is not Crystal Skull, which is not very nice in this sort of matchup, as Crystal Skull would deny some poison value.
It would, and it's an interesting choice to have chosen to take Lamp here. He will have his reasons for sure. Possibly in the Skellige match doesn't want to give any value to Morkvarg early on, just flips the Lamp. It does, remember, in the Nilfgaard matchup, struggle a lot for proactivity. So having that Lamp there gives you another option. Instead, you can do something exactly like he has now. Nilfgaard's proactivity is really, really awkward. And having Lamp opens up lots of options. You can play the Emissary onto a board. You can also just drop your Tawny Joust if you need to. So it does make it a little less awkward, as he has just demonstrated to us. Whoa.
Oh, and Kams immediately saying, listen here, buddy. Here is tempo, and I'm committing Brothan's luckily finding value. That could have ended badly, but he does have Emissary, so it wouldn't have been the end of the world. And Kams saying, listen, we are going even here. I'm going to push your cards out in round 2 because I do not necessarily want a round 3 against your Imprisonment leader.
Now that's a really interesting line from Kams. I know we all call this the Quad Joachim list, but in reality, you very rarely play it 4 times. taking a Joachim first turn or round one without having Usurper in hand. Now, in my experience, and I'm sure in most people's, it's a guaranteed Usurper pull from that, and can result in potential overcommitment. Obviously, we do see the Brathan's a huge card, but this is Cam's signalling intent here. He is basically saying, you know what, let's go, let's play, I have decided we're going in, and TailBot reacts in kind, pulls Menno into coup for another Joachim. Wow, these guys are not messing around here.
I'm seeing far too many Joachims on the board for my liking. This is definitely extremely scary here. Cam's now having the option to do the same with Menno. He has the option of cooing his Joachim also. We'll see if he's willing to commit that right now. Perhaps he decides to hold on to it. I don't know what's going on inside of his head, but he instead decides to go for the Assimilate card Vigo. Does he get the pack out? No, he doesn't. He goes for Duchess Informant instead.
He does indeed. Both players signalling their understanding of just how important round control can potentially be in this mirror. Which side of Last Say you fall on is pretty huge for this game, and they understand it greatly. Some big commitments. It's for all Nilfgaard mirrors in future, there should 100% be a Joachim counter, I think. How many are we going to see? We are currently at 3 in this match. I think the over-under, I think we're seeing at least 7 Joachims, minimum 7 Joachims. I would take that bet all day long here.
I would be offended if we do not see 7 Joachims. I expect 8 at least. Now, TailBot's hand here looking a lot stronger than Cam's, which might be a little bit of a problem for him because he doesn't necessarily want to commit all of these cards. We have Usurper round 1, that's never an option. We have Masquerade Ball, which is certainly not something you often see in round 1. And TailBot going ahead here and just saying, you know what, we're not seeing 8 Joachims in this matchup. We're seeing 7 at most. Sorry, Cams, it's not happening today.
Has taken the decision, no, that's it, and has purified it. Interesting line, I can see the logic, has decided, I don't want you to be able to do that even further. Has no read on the hand on the other side, but based on the drop, I think TailBot will assume that the hand is slightly stronger than it actually is. We'll expect there to be things like the Usurper and the Cupbearer in hand, with the speed that Cam's dropped it. That isn't the case, and Cam's here able to just keep dropping bronze cards and say, cool, I'll keep trading up, you keep giving me things. That would be great.
That certainly would be great. Well, TailBot now has the option of just putting that back neatly into Cam's deck with coated weapons. It depends whether he wants that engine to go back into the deck, as these sort of engines can actually go quite tall. You'd be amazed how big these engines get in a long round.
Definitely, and also, again, the one thing this list, it doesn't have as many units as you'd think to pull with those Joachims. Some awkward hand draws, and all of a sudden, you have nothing but spies left. So giving another target for that, certainly not ideal. I mean, if he's feeling very generous and wants to up the over-under on those Joachims, he could even give him another Joachim, but it seems very unlikely he's going to take that line. The cards he's got left may decide Vigo may be his better option here, or just to get out without losing on even.
This seems to be a reoccurring pattern with TailBot, and it completely makes sense. Under no circumstances do you want to commit that much in round 1. It certainly isn't worth it. And Cam's playing Gorther.
Well, he's certainly not giving yen, and knows he drops Goliath here, signalling that obviously it is above 9 cards, so he can put Joachim back if he chooses to. The swap isn't very good, but he does know he's drawing into yen minimally, so doesn't high roll anything particularly great, mainly because it's all already in the hand, but it's always scary. The Alchemist can literally swing entire games just by stealing something that you just don't want to see.
Yes, and luckily for TailBot, he has drawn all of his good cards, so there was no way that Kams was getting his hand on those with the Alchemist. Alright, so now Kams has round control, and he has the option of opting for a short or long round. It is entirely up to him at this point.
It is indeed. A little scary. The Goliath being down now means, unless he decides to play Joachim again in this round, he's not getting it back, because he's certainly not going to pop it back on the deck and then pass and give an additional one over. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does here. He has what you would consider a weaker hand and may think I can trade up here, but the risk of giving away Last Say could be really risky, and it's quite short and proactive plays. Possibly the Experimental Remedy, grabbing something from Tobliat's graveyard is an option, or does he just say, in true Nilfgaard fashion, let's go for the long round?
And seeing that you have control of the client, could you by any chance tell our audience what those 2 Vigos are representing on the left side of TailBot's hand?
You can see 2 Vigos on the left-hand side. You can. One of them is actually Artorias Vigo, and the other is the Usurper General. So he has the Usurper. It has converted when it evolves. It has decided now he wants to be Artorias Vigo. Far more peaceful gentleman sat under a wonderful mushroom here.
Alright, yes.
Okay.
And it's back to Usurper. Okay, Roderick we see coming out here.
And Kams will have known he was likely to pick those cards. He was searching for that Masquerade Ball, I think. Drops the Roderick. The only options were a Cupbearer, which he saw, Coup, to play it again, or Usurper. So maybe he was looking to slam and play Usurper, but for just a huge amount of tempo. Interesting, this very much signals, I think we're going for a little bit of a round here.
We certainly are, and Kams ironically making up for that lack of a card with his leader ability, so this can actually be quite scary. And what is nice is he has total round control, so the moment his side of the board is swarmed, he just has the ability to pass. And TailBot's goal here with his imprisonment leader won't have that effect, but perhaps he starts locking those engines now, and that's exactly what he does.
Indeed, yeah.
Alright,
No,
that makes
right.
total sense. It's exactly what TailBot planned, but unfortunately it's not in his hands whether we get to swarm the board or not. It's entirely in Kams.
It is indeed. And Kams on the other side does have access to locks as well, although has to use them in turns for units. And instead goes all leaders right away, leadering at 9 cards. That's huge, but finds the Usurper, which is pretty massive, but finds the Usurper in stage 2. It is not yet an aristocrat, only in its final stage, which is why it did not proc that Masquerade Ball.
I mean, he didn't need to, in all honesty. He had that lock ready, and he has gone ahead and stopped TailBot's engine from ticking as well. So Kams here making up for the fact that he doesn't have imprisonment, and this is starting to look scary here for TailBot. He needs to start committing if he wants to get ahead here.
I think TailBot definitely has a few points that he can play very quickly. He's only 11 behind here. Cam's going with some very, very intense, I'm going to play a lot of points lines. I don't think you would be expecting to see the Masquerade Ball dropped into a double cross at 9 cards. It's an interesting, because the longer you hold that leader, the more you threaten your opponent having to play out of order, playing cards suboptimally. TailBot now does not have to worry about this at all, and almost can play quite slowly here, knowing that he still has another card to find the points, and simply just drops the Tawny Joust.
That does make sense. Kams here having the option to do the same. He could also play slow. It depends on how much cards he wants to get out before his board is filled. He does have Cantarella in hand, which he'll want to use in order to get his Joachim back and perhaps play it twice. He instead goes for Duchess Informant, and he's going to replicate that Thirsty Dame, getting another engine on the board. I'm not surprised if that gets locked off the bat, and we see that first poison coming out. What will it target? It won't find a lot of value, to be honest. We don't have a lot of big cards on TailBot's side of the board yet.
No, true, and it does hit the Roderick, and I think based on the way he's playing and having Cantarella in hand, Kams could well be intending to use the location and get that extra Joachim out in this round. Lots of possible draws. It does have the hunting pack in there, does have a Thirsty Dame that was dropped in there as well with Van Moorleham's Cupbearer, but also his own Usurper. So lots of options for him if he decides to go down that line in this game.
Yes, Kams certainly might wanting to wait here because he does have another poison in hand too, actually. And if he decides, okay, he goes with the poison right off the bat.
Straight in.
That is more than fine. But he wants to make sure that he plays Joachim when TailBot has committed a large card, as he now has 2 poisons. One from the Masquerade Ball when he plays the Joachim, and one from his hand. So he's going to have some significant tool removal, but he first has to wait for TailBot to play something significant.
He does, and now all of the gold cards, with the exception of just one, are in TailBot's hand. Literally only missing Yen, but has access to it with Roderick. So this bleed may start to find some significant value if Kams can find a way to stay in the round. TailBot now working out which card do I want to commit that gives me enough reach without committing a little too much. Could Gwent, could simply drop the Brathens, or even the Vigo is possible because he could find Vigo into the thinning if he wants to here.
I mean, the reality is that TailBot has not yet procced his Masquerade Ball, and at some point he's going to have to play something that does. So he's holding on to that for some reason, perhaps also waiting for a larger target to poison.
Yeah, quite possibly, and also the longer it stays as a threat, he only has really the Roderick to proc it right now, without dropping his own Gurthagobed to get his Joachim back, so is likely setting that up instead, and has now put an operative on the top of the list. Hasn't gone for the high roll with the Alchemist, simply dropped a Viper Witcher and spawned an operative token at the top of the deck, which is not ideal for Kams if this does go into a short round.
Yes, and we see that lock coming out. It doesn't do anything, definitely signaling that Kams is still waiting for that large unit. It seems like they're playing a game of chicken here. None actually wants to play Joachim yet, because we know that whatever Joachim pulls is going to get poisoned. Both holding on to those poisons from Masquerade Ball, but how long can we do it? Kams is running out of options here. He has Menno, he has Cantarella, and he has a poison. He doesn't want to commit Yennefer yet, as he's not going to find any value with that. It all depends on what TailBot plays now.
It really does, and he'll be looking to try and set things up as he can. He will want ideally to find a decent Yennefer target next, because as you say, his hand's starting to look a bit awkward. He plays Vigo on the other side, and does he thin the doggos? He does not. Instead, he thickens the board for Kams and just keeps playing card after card after card.
Okay, and we see that first proc, the first poison coming out as well. It's odd that none of these players do pull out their doggos. It could very well be that they don't want to overswarm, but it is always a nice thinning mechanism, to say the least, in round one. But right now, it wouldn't make sense pulling them out anyway.
Definitely not. Now there's a choice there. The Usurper in stage 2 doesn't have Veil, but chose to poison a unit that had slightly less power instead, maybe signalling or trying to intend Kams to believe he has access to a Yen here to be able to steal that Usurper. He does in theory if he plays Roderick to grab it, so that could be really scary, meaning he can still transition a poison and maybe steal a Yen at the same time.
Yes, and Kam's in a position now where he might just have to play Joachim, because he does not have resilience on his artifact anymore, meaning that location card will not exist in round 3, and he won't have access to Joachim with his Cantarella. He now has a difficult position of... he's in a position where he needs to decide whether he's willing to commit here, or whether he wants to pass. He still knows that TailBot has a lot of big cards in hand, and you don't really want to get TailBot into round 3 with those. But TailBot does go with Brothans, which is a nice card to get out, and it's certainly something you can steal with Yennefer.
It is, and that's a huge swing though for TailBot. Manages to play out the Brothans for decent points, steal what is a thirsty Dame, procking his own ball without having to commit his high-end gold cards to do so, which makes this mirror so very scary, because your opponent's own cards actually synergize with yours for once. Very scary situation to be in here, and now Kams finds himself behind, meaning the Yen comes in, and yeah, there it goes.
That is a card you definitely want. It's the best one you're going to steal so far. And now to apply it to Blight or TailBot, he now has to decide.
Palindrome bot.
Palindrome bot. Yes, it's a horror trying to pronounce it correctly. I'm going to get it wrong many more times, but we'll just go with TailBot for now. He now has to decide what he's willing to commit here. He has quite a bit of options, and none of them are cheap, to say the least.
Very true, but he will also know and be glad to see Yen has gone, so his choice of commitment takes the Cantarella and decides, you want to steal my card? It's a really nice slide. It was curious to see if he took it, and he said, hey, you know what? I will play my Brathans again. Thank you, friend. That's very kind of you. And chooses to take that engine right back here. And it's something that Kams would have had the access to as well with Cantarella in hand. But this bleed looking scarier and scarier here for Kams.
Yeah, that was quite a nice card to get with Cantarella. Thank you for holding on to Brathans for me, Kams. I'll take that right back if you don't mind. Now, Kams here in a difficult position. He is quite a few points down. What does he do at this point?
He has not given in though here. He is taking the coup, signaling, you know what, I believe I am not out of this round yet. You can see that TailBot has used his Gaved to further ruin the draws. There is now a Nausicaa Sergeant, an Operative, and I believe a Thirsty Dame sat at the top of the list for Kams. Ruining those mulligans, plays a card and stays ahead. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes here.
Now, ironically, we're reaching that point where the board is going to swarm, but because Kams has round control, he just doesn't give TailBot the opportunity to take advantage of that situation with his leader. Instead, Kams is likely going to have to pass very soon here. Now, we'll see what Tablaya decides to play here. I doubt he overcommits, as it is very clear that he is ahead here. He's going to want to play the card that is going to help him least in a round 3.
Yeah, it's a little awkward because he doesn't want to play the Roderick here, because if he Rodericks, it's guaranteed to be Yen, and it sounds great unless Cam's final card is Cantarella, and that is something he's going to be considering. He could simply coup. Does not want to coup the Cantarella, though, because he already knows it's just a Nolziger Sergeant on the top.
Oh, wow.
Instead, launches the Usurper and says, I am ahead, I am not pulling these back, and I don't believe you can play another card, sir.
That is quite some commitment, with the clear objective of filling Cam's side of the board. I am going to be a card up in round 3, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you have a spy in hand, which you do. Cam's deciding not to even go and take that chance. He is going to pass, and we are going into round 3. This is looking quite good for Tablayat here. It's looking a little bit scary for Kams here with the card down, and Tablayat having access to his golds. And we see that doggo coming out there. Now,
we do.
We need to be careful so he doesn't brick by accident.
Yeah, if you're going to mulligan, it's going to be that gets mulliganed. And as we've seen, there is some clogging at the top of the list, and he will not be happy with those draws. He has missed Usurper, has missed the Cupbearer, hasn't even found the doggos himself for thinning. It is not the best situation you would hope to find. But honestly, neither hand is looking excessively strong. Has decided to mulligan the spy away, so no Yennefer coming on that side either, unless he mulligans one more time to try and find it. This is going to be the complete opposite of what you would expect a round 3 for Nilfgaard to be. That bleed has shortened it.
And
Wow.
luckily the doggos don't break. Yeah, that is quite a sad hand for Kams. Unfortunately, he didn't draw the cards that he needed here, and it could significantly have helped. But instead, we now have Tablayat taking the round with a card up. Let's see how this one plays out.
Now, his choice to mulligan away the Roderick is really interesting, because he's thrown both Roderick and Yen still in the deck here. The Cantarella from Kams could be game-changing if he manages to find either of those cards for himself. If he can find the Spy from Cantarella, it will be terrifying, because then he gets his own Usurper Emperor and could switch this game on its head.
That would be extremely significant if Kams does find it. And I mean, if you look at the statistics, the chances are quite high, seeing that TailBot only has 7 cards left in hand. So this is rather scary, and it's going to be interesting to see whether Kams decides to play that early or not. He can, of course, now decide to replicate the Nausicaa Sergeant, or he could wait and even get something like the Hunting Pack. He doesn't know what TailBot has in hand, though, so he will have to wait just a little bit longer to see.
He will, and obviously being able to replicate that Hunting Pack would actually be great, and that is why they are not, like the TailBot, for instance, isn't dropping that lock and playing his own, knows that neither player has played them yet, and if you can decide to use that Informant to be able to steal your opponent's Hunting Pack, it can be very, very good, because ultimately it plays for a lot of points.
It certainly does. It's a very strong card, unless it bricks, of course. It's a very nice thinning mechanism too, and it's very ironic that we don't actually see these doggos coming out in a round 1 or 2. Normally they're left in the deck or just in a round 3 hand here, and ironically this doggo alone is going to count for 8 points, which is quite significant in a short round 3.
It is, and I do genuinely believe it's going to come down here to what this Cantarella finds. Some interesting choices TailBot trying to work out now. Do I drop my Hunting Pack, or do I again stay slow? Am I going to Emissary here, perhaps, and use the Emissary boost? Probably lock with one of the engines now, as well as realistically engine-wise. There isn't anything else he's overly scared about. He may as well find the value. Or does he hold it? And he holds
Right,
it.
we see that Emissary coming down here, and what is Kams going for? He's going for Cantarella. Drum roll, please.
And he doesn't find the game changer. It is not the game changing card, but bear in mind he has coup, so he has another shot at this. He can try that again, and now he has a 1 in 3 chance, or a 2 in 6 chance of finding a card that could really swing this. He could Yen a 12-point card straight off the board. He could play Roderick into grabbing his own Usurper as well. So it's not over just yet.
It certainly isn't over until the thirsty dame sings. Now, TailBot needs to be careful here because he doesn't necessarily want to give the hunting pack to Kams either. Because if he plays this now, Kams has the option of playing that back at him. But perhaps that's preferable knowing that Cantarella is still on the board and TailBot knows exactly what cards he has missed here.
And that's the potential risk, right? That's what he's decided to do. He is up by a huge chunk of points here. It is 16 points. So I don't think there is an option to take anything else. In fact, this may already be over, but I may be wrong. Cam's not taking the hunting pack option because quite simply it isn't going to be enough points. Oh, and he gets the very worst of options. That feels really sad for Kams. But for TailBot, it means he is going to go through. He is inevitable. TailBot takes the win 3-2 after an incredible series here.
What a game. And TailBot taking it